8 videos, 500 years, one story. We started in a walled ghetto in Frankfurt in 1744. We ended with two brothers sitting across from each other at a peace table in Paris in 1919. Along the way, we followed the money through the Napoleonic Wars, the Bank War of 1832, the birth of the Federal Reserve, the crash of 1929, the fraud of 2008, and 40 years of a congressman from Texas trying to look inside a building nobody will let him into. And what we found, in every single story, was the same thing. The same families, the same institutions, the same architecture of power. Different centuries, different names, different crises, same machine. Before we go any further, here is everything we know so far. Every story in this series has a foundation, and the foundation begins with two families. In 1744, Mayer Amschel Rothschild was born inside a walled ghetto in Frankfurt, the Judengasse, where Jews were confined by law. No land, no profession, no freedom of movement. He died having built the most powerful banking empire in European history. His plan was simple and unprecedented. 5 sons, 5 cities: London, Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, Naples. Connected by a private courier network that moved faster than any government on earth. Their coat of arms, a clenched fist holding 5 arrows. One breaks easily. 5 bound together are unbreakable. In 1798, while the Rothschilds were establishing themselves across Europe, another family was laying its own foundation. Moses Marcus Warburg and Gerson Warburg founded M.M. Warburg and Company in Hamburg, a modest banking house on a cobblestone street, built to last. These two families, the Rothschilds and the Warburgs, would between them finance wars, build railways, bail out central banks, design new financial systems, and place their members inside the most powerful institutions in the Western world. They did it through intelligence, ambition, information, and speed. And the private networks they built, the courier systems, the family relationships, the transatlantic connections, became the template for every financial dynasty that followed. The Rothschilds made their name in war. Between 1803 and 1815, the Napoleonic Wars tore Europe apart. Every government needed money, enormous, desperate amounts of it. Nathan Rothschild in London financed the British war effort, moving gold across Napoleon's continental blockade, paying Wellington's soldiers in the field, underwriting the British Treasury's international payments. James Rothschild in Paris simultaneously maintained relationships with the French government. Both sides, same family. By the time the guns fell silent at Waterloo, the Rothschilds held irreplaceable positions in the sovereign finance of every major European power. 100 years later, the Warburgs did the same thing. Paul Warburg in New York managing American wartime financial policy from inside the Federal Reserve. Max Warburg in Hamburg advising the Kaiser's War Council. 2 brothers, 2 nations, 1 war. And in 1919, at the Paris Peace Conference, the chief financial advisor of the American delegation looked across the table at the head of the German financial delegation. It was his brother. The Rothschilds funded both sides from outside governments. The Warburgs funded both sides from inside them. Same principle, 1 century apart. The architecture was identical. While the Rothschilds were building their European empire, a battle was raging in America over who would control the young republic's money. The Second Bank of the United States was the most powerful financial institution in America. Its president, Nicholas Biddle, had turned it into a financial powerhouse. He advised presidents. He manipulated congressmen. He funded the newspapers that covered him. Andrew Jackson called it the Monster Bank. And on July 10, 1832, Jackson looked at the most powerful financial institution in America and spoke a phrase that would define his presidency forever. "The bank is trying to kill me, but I will kill it." He kept that promise. Jackson vetoed the recharter, won the election of 1832 by a landslide, removed all federal deposits, and watched Biddle's retaliatory credit contraction destroy his own credibility. The monster bank was dead. But here is the lesson Jackson's victory missed. The battle was never about one bank. It was about whether private banking interests would control the American monetary system. Jackson won the battle. 70 years later, on a private island off the coast of Georgia, the bankers won the war. November 1910. 6 men boarded a private railway car in New Jersey under cover of darkness. Senator Nelson Aldrich, Arthur Shelton, Abraham Piatt Andrew, Henry Davison of J.P. Morgan, Frank Vanderlip of National City Bank, representing the Rockefeller interests, and Paul Warburg, the German-born immigrant who had spent the previous 8 years telling anyone who would listen that America needed a central bank. They used only first names. They carried no identifying documents. They called themselves the First Name Club. Over 9 days at the Jekyll Island Club, they drafted what would become the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. The men who wrote the legislation that would regulate American banking were the bankers themselves. Senator Aldrich later admitted on the record, if Congress had known who actually wrote the bill, it never would have become law. So they disguised it, stripped Aldrich's name from it, pushed it through Congress 2 days before Christmas when many members had already gone home. Woodrow Wilson signed it that night. Andrew Jackson had killed the monster bank in 1832. The bankers had built it back. And Paul Warburg, the man who designed the Federal Reserve on a chalkboard in a private room on a Georgia island, was sworn in as one of its first board members on August 10, 1914. The same month, the world went to war. The Federal Reserve was supposed to prevent financial panics. It has presided over 14 recessions and the 2 worst financial collapses in American history. In 1929, 16 years after the Fed opened its doors, the stock market crashed. But as we showed you in video 1, it wasn't an accident. 5 men sat in a room and knew what was coming. Albert Wiggin of Chase National Bank short-sold his own bank stock and made $4 million in the crash. Richard Whitney walked calmly onto the trading floor, placing enormous buy orders, buying time while the insiders positioned themselves. The Great Depression that followed destroyed 30 million American lives. The regulatory response, Glass-Steagall, the SEC, the rules, was built to prevent it ever happening again. By 1999, most of it had been dismantled. In 2008, Goldman Sachs built a product called Abacus, a bundle of the worst mortgage securities John Paulson could find, specifically designed to fail. They sold it to their own clients without telling them it had been designed to fail. Without telling them, Paulson was simultaneously betting against it. John Paulson made $1 billion. 8 million Americans lost their jobs. 6 million lost their homes. The architects of the fraud, Dick Fuld, Angelo Mozillo, Hank Paulson, Stan O'Neill, walked free. Eric Holder chose not to prosecute, then returned to his law firm whose clients included the banks he had declined to charge. 2 crashes, 80 years apart, same architecture. Here is what 8 videos have taught us. These stories are not separate, they are one story. The Rothschilds built the template, a private family network that moved faster than governments, financed both sides of conflicts, and accumulated influence by making themselves indispensable to every power structure in Europe. The Warburgs followed the template, building a transatlantic network, placing family members inside the financial institutions of 2 nations simultaneously, and designing the central bank that still controls American monetary policy today. The men who designed the Federal Reserve in 1913 were the direct successors of the men Nicholas Biddle had used to lobby Congress in 1832. The men who caused the crash of 2008 were the direct institutional successors of the men who caused the crash of 1929. Hank Paulson, the Treasury Secretary who managed the 2008 bailout, was a former CEO of Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs received $10 billion in TARP funds and $12.9 billion through the AIG bailout. The firm that was too connected to fail was bailed out by its own former CEO, using taxpayer money. The revolving door between Wall Street and Washington, the one Eric Holder used when he left the DOJ and returned to Covington and Burling to represent the banks he had declined to prosecute, that door was built in 1913 by the men who met on Jekyll Island. Who were the successors of the men who lobbied for the Second Bank of the United States? Who were the successors of the men who designed the Rothschild courier network? One story, 500 years. The architecture never changes. Throughout this series, there have been men who saw the architecture clearly and fought it. Andrew Jackson was the first. He looked at the monster bank and said, "The bank is trying to kill me, but I will kill it." He kept that promise. And the panic of 1837 that followed his victory showed what happens when you remove the central banking infrastructure without replacing it with something better. Ron Paul was the last. 30 years, the same bill, session after session, an empty chamber, a hostile Congress, both parties, the entire weight of the Federal Reserve's lobbying operation against him. He won 327 to 98 in the House. The Senate never held a vote. What connects Jackson and Paul across 150 years is not ideology. It is the same question. Who controls the money, and who do they answer to? Jackson's answer was, the people, through their elected president. Paul's answer was, the people, through their elected Congress. Both were defeated by the same force. The private banking interests that have, in different forms, under different names, through different institutions, shaped the American monetary system since the Republic was founded. Jackson destroyed the bank. They built it back. Paul tried to audit it. The doors are still closed. 8 videos. Here is what we know. The Rothschilds built the template in 1744. The Warburgs followed it in 1798. The monster bank rose and fell between 1816 and 1841. The Federal Reserve was born in secret in 1910 and signed into law in 1913. The crash of 1929 was not an accident. The crash of 2008 was not an accident. The men responsible for both walked free. And for 40 years, one man tried to look inside the institution that presided over all of it. The doors are still closed. But there is a chapter we have not told yet. Between the death of the monster bank and the birth of the Federal Reserve, between Andrew Jackson's victory in 1832 and Paul Warburg's design in 1910, America spent 78 years without a central bank. And in 1873, something happened that changed the financial world forever. A crash so severe, so sudden, so total, that it makes Black Thursday in 1929 look like a correction. It lasted 6 years. It destroyed economies across 3 continents simultaneously. And the man at the center of it, Jay Cooke, was the same man who had financed the Civil War for Abraham Lincoln. That is the next video. The Panic of 1873, the First Great Depression, the one nobody talks about. Subscribe to Vault in Ruin. We go where the money went.